If we're talking the importance for the Brand X method to athletics, 100%. And the reason is we teach kids not only to be safe in sport, but we actually bring about their full potential inside of sport. If you focus on sport only, you know, you're opening yourself up for overuse injuries, and you're truncating your ability to go further inside of that sport. If you practice only soccer 365 days out of the year, yeah, you might be a good soccer player, right? But you're never actually getting faster, stronger, more agile, more accurate, right? Your coordination might not even get better.
Okay, the first thing we in our squat progression is the block squat. What I'm going to ask him to do is put his feet together. I want his heels and his toes touching. We're going to ask them to push their hips back, push their knees out slightly, and go down only as far as they can keep their feet flat in the ground. Good. And stand back up. What we're trying to teach them to do is move the hips first and keep and block them so they can't go valgus with the knees. So they're pushing the knees out. That is all there really is to the block squat.
The whole progression in terms of leading an athlete from the blocked squat to eventually the overhead squat as an assessment tool is to build motor patterns in a way that's really safe for children so that they're never doing a loaded squat with poor motor patterns. We progress them from the blocked variation to the box variation, and then further on down the line, eventually to an air squat, to a goblet squat, to a front squat, so that by the time they have a barbell on their back, they have thousands of repetitions with perfect knee position, perfect hip position, perfect bracing before they're ever loaded.
Moving to the box squat, we're talking about young kids. What I'm going to ask him to do is line up and kind of straddle the box. What I want him to do is I want him to pin his calves to the box. So he's going to step back. And what I'm asking him to do is keep his calves pinned to the box and to sit down as far as he can toward the box. It's going to teach the kid to sit back. Stand back up for me. Good. With the older kids, we'll let them step away about 6 inches, and I'm going to ask them sit to the far end of the box. Just sit way back. Again, we're looking for them to start the movement with the hips, sit back, and try to keep that shin more perpendicular rather than letting it to drive forward.
What we found with the kids as they come into our program, and more so this has been, the past 5 to 10 years, I would say, we found that kids tend to be a little bit more sedentary nowadays, so they end up with tight hip flexors, kind of tight spinal erectors, being pulled in this position where they want to shift their knees forward inside of the squat. So the motor pattern that we're really searching for out of the box squat is teaching them to sit back into their hamstring, sit back into the posterior chain, and this is there kind of as a safety net so that they're not just going to flop over backwards. It's there to catch them. They'll have the support, and then they can stand up from that position as we build the strength in the positions.
Working next is the air squat. And with the air squat, we've also, while they're going through these other progressions, we've also worked on teaching them how to neutralize their hip and spine and how to brace. The air squat is just a simple air squat. Again, starting with the hips going back and sitting down below parallel, trying to keep his knees from sliding forward, and stand back up. So we go from the block squat to the variation of the box squat, and now we can introduce the air squat.
Yeah, like he's mentioned, at this point, they have the ability to externally rotate their femur at the hip because we've practiced so many repetitions of the block squat. They have the ability to sit back into their hamstrings and their posterior chain, so kind of blocking the knee from traveling forward because we've done so many repetitions of the box squat. But also alongside of that, we've practiced breathing, how to squeeze and neutralize the spine, as well as a hip hinge, so they understand how to sit and hinge into their hips rather than sending their hips back separate from the rest of their spine.
We're going to start to introduce load, and we're going to do that with the goblet squat. With the goblet squat, we can really start to challenge their midline stability. But all he's going to do is go ahead and pick it up, hold it here in this position, and he's going to replicate his squat. Any comment on the goblet squat?
So the goblet squat is great because we can use it as a counterbalance to put us into a proper position. And this we can use interchangeably with the air squat as long as the weight is light to really teach full range of motion and utilize maybe even taking away some of our own body weight in certain positions. The goblet squat is really great at teaching that kind of bar path, I want to say, that motion of the squat.
We also like the fact that in the goblet squat, we can start to talk about the upper torso and keeping that in a good position. And that'll translate then to the next movement, which is the front squat.
Yep.
So we
Let's go over there to the bar, yeah. It's a little high for me, but that'll do.
So once they know how to squat, really what we need to do, if we've done the work with the goblet squat, they got an idea of where their upper body should be and how to hold that in a squat. We can start talking about where the forearms should be and how to hold the bar and to rack the bar on the front for the front squat. And then generally at this point, I will ask them to, for the older kids, I'll ask them to bring their feet in a little bit so that they have a little bit narrower stance and have them go ahead and squat. At this point, our kids can start to become a little bit understanding that maybe a squat, different foot positions for different squats.
That's for different focus reasons. Inside of the back squat, we're trying to recruit more of the posterior chain, so we're sitting further back into the hamstrings, even recruiting a little bit more adductor than we would inside of the front squat, so we have a wider stance generally. Inside of the front squat, more quad dominant, so we're going to bring that stance in just a touch.
Then moving to the back squat.
As far as the upper back for the front squat, and let's talk about the elbows just a little bit too, yeah?
Go ahead.
So elbow position, super common inside of the fitness industry to cue elbows up and not let the elbows flare out inside of the front squat. But if you look at my upper back,
what happens here?
if I drive my elbows up and inward, then I'm rounding out that upper torso. It makes it really easy for the rest of the spine to follow suit. So we like to have the kids point their elbows down and somewhat apart in just a natural position, and you'll notice my upper back is a lot more supported. So that makes it really easy for me to keep that neutral spine through the entire squat.
When we were first working with kids, we used to tell them to put their elbows up and hold them up like they were having lasers. And what we'd see is they would end up with this rounding here. So now what we ask them to do is, for the younger kids, is hands by your side. Reach up, grab your ears. Good, now bring your hands down to your shoulders. Boom, that's your position for this front squat. So we had to change that cue because what we saw is a huge translation from younger kids who were used to front squatting with their elbows in here like this and making them lasers, and they had that internally rotated shoulder and not a good platform for the bar to sit on. So let's go ahead and go to the back squat. Here in the back squat, like the bar to sit low on the shoulders. So like it on the spine of the scapula. We're going to ask the child to, our kids to have a wider than normal stance. So again, now they're getting some variation there in their stance. And from here, we're going to ask them to hinge the hips and sit way back. For kids, when we train this, we tell them really want them to hinge at the hip, and then we want them to bring the hips straight down, driving the knees out. That way we don't get that hinging down through the entire movement where they kind of get a good morning out of it. But we still get those lower legs perpendicular to the ground and the hip coming down in a good position.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else?
No, the back squat, you guys are masters of teaching, but I think something to focus on would be the upper back. I don't think a lot of people focus on the upper back enough with the back squat. So hand position wise and placement of the elbows inside of the squat become really important for us when we're coaching kids. Once that gets sloppy, then things start to fall out of place. You get weird bar path, weird ranges of motion, stuff starts to kind of fall apart. So we really focus on making the upper back as tight as possible with the kids, keeping the elbows just slightly behind the bar rather than, curved upward. What we've noticed is that if we tell kids to drive their elbows upward, you'll get that same position that you notice with that front squat position. So you'll kind of have that rounding of the upper back And that's where that bar path will get thrown off, so you'll see the hips rising first out of the bottom position. So we'll tell the kids just slightly down and then squeezing towards their body, so it'll help engage the lats, help keep the upper back really tight.
The final squat that we teach is really for an assessment, and it's the overhead squat. I want his foot position here to be about the same as he had it in the front squat. Go ahead and squat. We're looking for flexibility. We're looking for problems with that squat. Usually flexibility problems, which will define problems that may be hidden.
Yeah, and incorporating the front squat into the squat progression really means that the kids at this point have also been learning a safe shoulder position, an active shoulder position. We want to try to avoid inside of the overhead squat an internally rotated shoulder or the bar being forward or behind the body in any way. It's got to be splitting the body, externally rotated and supported through the lat, so the shoulder's driving upwards towards the load. That's really all we're looking for.
And that's our progression for the squat.